Hello and welcome to this celebration of the life and legacy of Jerome Williams. We are honored to have today a number of co-authors, mentees, friends of Dr. Jerome Williams. I'm Sterling Bone, Professor of Marketing at the John M. Huntsman School of Business at Utah State University. It was my honor and pleasure to know Jerome and to work with him over the last decade and to spend some time getting to know Jerome on so many different levels. Um, just in terms of background regarding this session, um, Jerome passed away unexpectedly, and prior to his passing, he had planned to do a recording where he was going to celebrate the induction of being an AMA fellow, something that Jerome was very proud of and really excited to be able to have been recognized in this way in his career. And one of his goals or one of his thoughts as he was preparing to record his own presentation was he wanted to share in the experiences that he had with co-authors and those that he had associated with throughout his career. And so we come together as a group of friends, colleagues, and associates of Jerome. May I just share my brief thought about Jerome? Jerome sent me a text on his 74th birthday back in early January. And as I wished him happy birthday, Jerome immediately responded how grateful he was to have had a career where he was able to associate with so many different people. And that it was his desire that as he was going into the sunset of his career, and he actually used those words, in the sunset of his career, that he wanted to continue to leave an impact and a legacy upon our field. And I am grateful to have seen directly Jerome's impact because he's impacted my life and the life of so many of us. I'm now going to ask Sonya to share some thoughts.
Hi, we have a lot of great scholars, pioneers, and genuinely nice people in our field. However, it's a lot rarer to find all these characteristics in one person as we did in Jerome Williams. My first research article, was with Jerome and Bill Qualls in the Journal of Public Policy and Marketing. And my favorite story about Jerome actually involves how we met. As a doctoral student, my classmate Jerry Henderson and I were really conscious about the lack of Black faculty in our program, and we decided to create our own support network of faculty and PhD students. This was in about 1992, prior to the PhD project and the MDSAs. So we identified and created a list of all the Black faculty we could in marketing and started to email them. Jerome was the first one who wrote back, and he wrote back immediately. We went to the dean and asked for money for a Black professor visiting series, and Jerome would be our first guest. On the day of his talk, I went to pick him up from his hotel. As I approached, I saw a woman who parked in front of where he was, standing in his suit. She jumped out the car and handed him her keys and said something like, "I'm late, I'll come back for the ticket," and walked swiftly into the hotel. She had assumed he was the doorman. So I approached Jerome and he looked at me and said, "That's a nice car. Do you think we should take hers instead of yours?" And we both laughed. So despite being stereotyped, he made a joke of it and didn't let it bother him at all. He did use the incident to open his talk to Northwestern doctoral students and MBAs about ethnic marketing and marketplace discrimination. And this small example from 1992 reflects on how he was able to translate his everyday experiences of race into important scholarly research in a funny, loving, and humane way. His selfless guidance, generous gifts of time, and sharing of resources is a key shoulder that I stand on as I work to continue his legacy to help create racial equity in the marketplace. Thanks, Sterling.
Thank you, Sonya. Next, we'll hear from May Lewin. May Lewin, would you unmute for a sec?
Can I start? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Jerome Williams was a mentor, a close friend, and a guardian figure who I could always turn to, especially in times of any professional predicaments. In the 1990s, Jerome and Lillian came to Hong Kong and Singapore. They fell in love with Asia and became regular visitors to this part of the world for the next 3 decades. I was very lucky to meet Jerome almost by accident as a PhD student at a conference in Singapore in the late 1990s. Although I was only a student from a foreign country, I remember Professor Jerome Williams, a senior faculty member, giving me advice in his unique, humble, friendly, and relaxed way. These encounters led to lifelong collaborations, friendship, and generous mentorship over the years. Jerome held numerous visiting positions at universities in Hong Kong and Singapore, with his most recent trip being as a Wee Kim Wee professor at my university, the Nanyang Technological University in Singapore. In Singapore, Jerome and Lillian made many friends, both in academia and in the local community. These local friends came from all walks of life, as Jerome and Lillian were one of the few visitors who stayed in a local housing estate rather than in expatriate communities. They kept in touch with all their friends and generously hosted the many visitors from Asia who had the opportunity to visit them in the United States. For me personally, Jerome has been a wonderful role model who has played a large part in shaping my own research trajectory. My work in health communication, and in particular, efforts to impact policy and societal concerns in Asia, were inspired much by his visions to translate research to better our world. Jerome leaves behind a great legacy and will be deeply missed by everyone he has touched across the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, May. Next, we'll hear from Kevin Thomas.
Yeah, I first met Jerome in 2006 while trying to figure out which PhD program I wanted to attend. And as I contacted people, Jerome's name kept coming up as someone who was interested in multicultural advertising and marketing. Folks kept saying, well, you need to talk to Jerome Williams. And before reaching out to him, I decided to kind of look at some of his work. I was already intimidated because it was clear to me that this was a big deal. This person was going to be a big deal in the field. And I was definitely much more intimidated after reading some of his papers. But one night I finally got the courage after a couple of drinks to send him an email. And I woke up, he had responded. He wanted to talk to me that day. And so we set up a time to talk. And it was just so clear to me that this person was not only brilliant, but truly just a wonderful, kind human being. And from that day, he never strayed from that path. He was always an amazing mentor as I went through UT Austin, not just there financially helping me through that process of paying for that process, but making sure that my ideas were fully developed and doing so in always a kind way. But what I would most remember and appreciate about Jerome is just his ability to show such kindness to others, and truly that sense of love that he shared with his partner, his wife, Lillian. While he was transferring from UT to his next institution, Rutgers, a very busy time of his life, he made time to come to my commitment ceremony and my partner commitment ceremony. And even during that time frame, he made time to write a speech for us. He made time to kind of show up there and be fully present with us during that joyous occasion. And I just remember just kind of watching him and Lillian in these kind of quiet moments together and just really seeing this tenderness between them. And just, it felt like a masterclass in devotion. And so I would remember most what I learned from Jerome is how to be just a truly good, loving, kind person. And I will miss him truly.
Thank you, Kevin. Next, we'll hear from Anne-Marie Hakstian.
So early in my academic career, I hadn't been hired into a tenure track position yet, and I was attending my first marketing and public policy conference in Washington, D.C. I decided to attend a session where someone was talking about businesses that were discriminating against customers based on their race. And I had never heard of such a thing. The presenter had a slide that showed litigation that had been filed against 5 or 6 national chain stores that I knew well. And after the conference, I just couldn't get that slide out of my head. So eventually I looked up the presenter and reached out to this man, Dr. Jerome Williams. He responded immediately, sent me the slide, And we scheduled a time to talk. We had a great conversation, and I was drawn into his orbit. Over the next weeks, months, and years, we talked about our work. Eventually, we became collaborators and then co-authors. He welcomed me like he has done with, I would say, thousands of others, as a follower, a student, and a friend. And he helped me to learn and grow in many ways, both academic, professional, and personal. So for me, consumer discrimination is largely academic. As a white person, of course, it pains me to know that others are hurt every day as they go about their lives. And for Jerome, it was academic and personal. He illustrated the problem by telling us about his own life experiences, as others have mentioned, and his family members' experiences. And he did that very matter-of-factly. I found that very compelling. I understood from that he acknowledged that it was just part of his life as a Black person in America, and that even though he was highly educated and very successful, he knew that people, some people didn't care to see that about him. And I'm sure that was painful for him, but he really didn't talk about that very much with me. However, one conversation stays with me because it was an unusual moment when he did reveal some of that pain. At the time, we were developing our framework for analyzing instances of consumer discrimination. And one of the dimensions in our framework allowed us to classify incidents as either overt or subtle discrimination. And so I had been researching a case that was brought by a group of African-American plaintiffs against Cracker Barrel Old Country Stores. It was a class action lawsuit. And we were talking about the specific allegations that had been detailed in the complaint in that lawsuit. One of those allegations was that servers had been on a regular basis taking food from the garbage cans in the kitchen and serving it to Black customers. Jerome's facial expressions and body language conveyed the discomfort he felt. He commented on it and how revolting it was. And I believe this, recognition of the pain was part of what fueled his drive to do the work that actually makes a difference in people's lives. And to always, always focus on solutions. And so I intend to continue on that path as a way of honoring Jerome.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Finally, we'll hear from Glenn Christensen.
Well, I love and a big amen to everything that's been said about Jerome Williams. There's maybe not enough good things to say about him and the impact he has. I love that metaphor of drawn into his orbit. And if you're watching this, you probably too were at some point in your career or your personal life, or both, more likely, drawn into Jerome Williams' orbit, because he had a gravitas about him, and he had a way of making people feel important and connecting people with others who might be able to help them and forward their own personal journeys, whether they be personal journeys or in their personal life or professional journeys in their careers and in the academy particularly. I was blessed to know Jerome as a PhD student at Penn State University, where we became friends. And in more recent years, in the last 12 years, in the research that he has been working on with Sterling and I, it's been a blessing beyond compare to be in constant communication with him nearly every week. multiple times as we've worked through some of these issues. And as it's been said, what motivated him, certainly his own lived experience in the world, but also as I got to know him better and as we talked personally, it became clear that he was a man of deep faith and a man of God, and that's who he wanted to be most, and that's who he was for his wife and for his children and for his congregation and for that community and that part of his life. And we talked about how one of the motivations for participating in this sort of transformative consumer research and trying to understand it was to make a more just and maybe even bring a sense of God's love for all of his children to all of his children. And that for me has been personally deeply motivating to participate with someone like that. And also, and I think because of his deep faith, he didn't let the darkness overwhelm him. And these great stories about his capacity to experience some of the dark parts of our community and not get lost in that, but be active in trying to make things better and not get lost personally in the hate, but to rise above, to bring an equality and a justice and a sense of love into the world. And that's what I'm so grateful for about Jerome Williams, and one of the things I'll miss about him very much.
Thank you, Glenn. There's many things that can be said about Jerome, and I know it would be Jerome's wish that we probably cease talking about him and getting back to work, to furthering the good work of research. And I hope that as we remember and honor Jerome as co-authors, as friends, as colleagues, that we'll try to do what Jerome would do, and that is do research of impact, to be a teacher and a friend and a mentor to many. Jerome, my friend, we'll miss you and we love you. Thank you for leaving your legacy. Let it live on.